Picture this, we've just won the lottery and we decide that we want to run a MotoGP team for one season. Well, first, we'll need around $30 million, which is a pretty staggering amount of money. But why do MotoGP teams cost $30 million a season? Well, after researching for hours on the internet, I'm going to break it all down for you now. There's a few different categories we need to go through as there's a lot of moving parts in a MotoGP team. Some are fairly obvious and some aren't so obvious. We're also going to talk about how a MotoGP team can literally get free money in a couple of different ways. First up, we need a bike. Well, two to be specific. But how do you buy a bike to race in the first place? Well, every team on the grid is classed as a factory team or a satellite team. Factory teams have big budgets, which are generally funded by the manufacturer. Currently in MotoGP, you have Honda, Aprilia, Yamaha, Ducati, and KTM. These manufacturers all have a factory team, and they put the effort into all of the R&D to build and develop their bikes. A satellite team, on the other hand, generally has a smaller budget, fewer staff, and they don't have the ability to create their own bikes. So what happens is they'll rent them from a manufacturer. In our example, we're going to be running a satellite team. We just don't have the budget to run a full factory team. Now you might be asking, if we don't have an unlimited budget, surely we're at a disadvantage. Well, yes and no. While our budget is smaller, the governing body of MotoGP, called Dorna, incentivizes manufacturers to provide satellite teams with a competitive bike. For every bike a manufacturer supplies to a satellite team, Dorna will pay them around $1 million. Also, if they provide a competitive bike, then it will look better for them. They'll end up with more screen time and everyone's happy. So what bike do we choose? Well, in this case, let's assume we have the choice of bike that we want. We'll go with 2-year-old Ducatis, which will set us back around $4 million for the entire season. Now remember, we're only renting them, so we're going to have to give them back at the end of the season. It might also seem a little unfair if we're getting a year-old bike, but these bikes will be fully upgraded from the previous season. We're also going to get access to the year-old data from the factory team, which in our case is Ducati Lenovo, and we also have the option to potentially get one current season bike if performance is good. The bikes will also come with some basic parts package, but we still need to fork out for our own replacement parts. And that brings us on to our next point. You've got 21 races in total and 2 bikes to run. Making sure we have all the parts we need to maintain and rebuild these bikes when needed is absolutely crucial. All of those replacement parts are going to set us back $6 million. And unfortunately, at some point during the season, it's all going to go wrong and someone is going to have an accident. It does happen, no harm done. A tiny drop at low speeds can still cost a MotoGP team $15,000. Remember, these are prototype bikes. You can't buy any of these parts off of the shelf. If a rider has a bigger accident, then you're looking at somewhere close to $100,000 as a repair bill. So let's add another $1 million for crash damage repairs. Okay, so the bikes are accounted for, but we obviously need some riders. A lot of things can influence a rider's decision to race with you, depending on the bikes, bonuses, salary options, and so on. Now, salaries are very, very secret, and we can only assume these based on information on the internet. And I found a general estimate for the rider salaries from 2023, so we're going to use that as our estimate. Obviously, we can't go with someone like Marc Marquez or Pecco Bagnaia, we just don't have the budget for it. So we have to look a little bit further down the order. The one thing ideally we do want though is a couple of experienced riders that know how to develop a team moving forward. Let's, for argument's sake, assume that the riders we're looking for are also looking for their own contracts, and we managed to strike a deal with Maverick Vinales and Johann Zarco. With a little bump in pay, we're going to need $8.75 million for the pair of them. We also want to try and incentivize them a little bit, so let's add another $300,000 each as a performance bonus. Now, to be clear, if they don't hit the targets that we set, they don't get that performance bonus, but let's assume that they will. So having bikes and riders is all well and good, but you need people to help run the team. You can't do it all by yourself, and we're going to need a couple of different teams. First up, we need technical staff. These include crew chief, mechanics, engineers, data analysts, a team principal, and so on. And we're going to need at least 30 of them. It's going to be really hard to break down all the individual salaries, so let's say each of these team members is going to cost an average of $65,000. That adds a total of $1.95 million to our budget. The next team that we need is the staff back at Team HQ. You need teams for financing, logistics, marketing, operations, HR and IT, and much more to help everything run smoothly. Let's say you need another team of 20 to be stationed back at Team HQ, and they have an average salary of around $50,000. That's going to cost another $1 million per season. We also need a place to call Team HQ. Let's say we get somewhere not too far from a major city, but far enough away that it helps save on a little bit of cost. We probably need a 1,000 meter square building, and the rent alone is going to be $450,000 a season. Then you have all of the utilities, insurance, office supplies, and so on, and that's going to cost another $50,000 a year. Finally, the hospitality staff. Cooks, cleaners, other general hospitality and customer relation staff need to be at every single weekend to help manage what goes on in the paddock. Let's say the average salary here is $45,000, and we're going to need another 10 hospitality members. That's going to cost another $450,000 per season. Now, something that is really important but overlooked a lot of the time is all of the travel costs. How much does it cost to get all of the team to all of the races? You can't expect the team members to pay for their own flights, it just wouldn't work. We also need to account for some members like the riders and team principal flying higher class than the rest of the team. So let's quickly break it all down. If you have 40 members of staff traveling to every event, 37 are going to be in economy class, and the riders and team principal are going to be in business class. You're going to spend $1.1 million on economy flights for the team and another $240,000 for the business class flights. Now, this is assuming economy flights cost an average of $1,500 and business class flights cost an average of $4,000. Obviously, you have to make sure everyone has a place to stay for at least 4 nights every single race weekend. And that's going to set you back another $600,000 a season. You might think that's it for travel. Not quite. We're also going to need to rent some cars to get people to and from the circuit and back to their hotels every single day. That's going to be another $90,000 per season. And even though you have the hospitality food, which will cater to the team to a certain extent, you're going to be paying for other meals when hospitality isn't available. Let's say we give every team member $50 allowance per day that they're away. That's going to set us back another $160,000. So we have the bikes, the riders, and the team, but we need to get everything to all of the races across the world. Now, just to make things easier, we're going to split up the races. Let's assume we're going to be flying the equipment to all of the races outside of Europe and then driving trucks for all of the races inside Europe. For the 9 races in Category 1, we're going to assume we need to air freight around 8,000 kilos of equipment and parts per race at a cost of $5 per kilo. With 81,000 kilos in total we need to ship at $5 per kilo, it's going to cost $405,000. For the other 12 races in Category 2, we're going to need some trucks. Let's say 2 trucks for the bikes and equipment and another 2 trucks for the hospitality unit. With all the fuel and maintenance, we're going to need around $60,000 per truck per season. So adding that all on is another $240,000. That isn't taking into account the cost to run the hospitality unit. These units are really impressive. Just take a look at all these pictures. They look like they're permanent buildings, and the engineering and how they build them and take them down is pretty incredible. Unfortunately, all of this doesn't come cheap. We decide that we want to buy a brand new one of these. That's going to cost $2.5 million including tax. So certainly not cheap, but it is an investment for the future of the team. Now, we also need to make sure that we cater to the thousands and thousands of people that are going to be coming through our hospitality unit every single season. When all the food and drink is accounted for, it's going to cost another $700,000 per season. Right, so after all of this has been added up, we run into a slight problem. We only really want to spend $30 million, and we've gone over budget. So what do? Well, remember earlier I said there were a couple of ways to get free money to help us run the team. The first way is through sponsorship. We can sell space on the bike to sponsors, as well as merchandise and the hospitality unit. Even the pit garage space can all be sold to companies willing to sponsor us. Let's say we strike a deal with a few companies and we manage to get an additional $1 million in sponsorship. That'll bring us back down below our budget, but it's still pretty tight. Luckily, Dorna, the governing body in MotoGP, will actually give us some more money to help with entry fees, general expenses, flight costs, and a few other things. They have a certain amount of money that they give out to all of the satellite teams every season. And let's say our cut is another $1.5 million that we get back. So when you take everything into account, you're looking at $27,878,000 for a single season in MotoGP. Now, these numbers are educated guesstimates based on research and data we found across a variety of different sources, so just keep that in mind. But it's still interesting to see how much it would potentially cost to run a MotoGP team. Talking of expensive things in MotoGP, if you want to learn about a manufacturer that used an actual F1 engine in their MotoGP bike, then click on this video here. Thanks for watching, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.